Okay, maybe let's start. I've just sent Phil an email, so hopefully he can join us soon. Okay, so everyone can see my screen, right? Oops, present.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet? Okay, let me see. Um, yeah? Okay. So can you see the slides here?
Now we can. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so the agenda for today is I'll go through the objectives that so since last time's meeting, we've decided to focus on research on placement, and to focus on that part as the whole academic staff life cycle project. So I'll first look at what are the objectives that we want to achieve through doing the placement tool, and the second one is the key insights that a list of the key insights that I've had based on the research through placement, and the third one is a main chunk of this presentation would be on the new placement tool, and also what the algorithm and the logic and the criteria that we should consider when we are placing the teachers in the various placement streams. And the fourth, we talk about phasing of this project, and lastly, the next steps. So I have quite a lot of content to cover, so maybe in the first part I'll go a little bit faster, but let me know if you have any questions at any point. So the objectives, which I have posted on the Basecamp, is basically the same, but I would just go through them and make sure and get everyone to agree on them first. So there's immediate objectives, and then there are medium-term and more longer-term objectives. So for the immediate objectives for recruitment placement, the first one is to increase the efficiency of the recruitment placement. And that is also to complete the preliminary recruitment placement and to announce the candidates before training starts. So that is currently not the case in Uganda and Liberia, because resource-wise, this is just quite difficult to do. But with the placement tool, hopefully that will be able, we can increase efficiency so they can actually do the placement or the preliminary placement before the training. So the second objective is to increase the percentage of teachers placed into preferred locations for East Africa. So right now I don't have a final number for that yet, so that is just in square brackets, and I think that we need to discuss more based on getting more data from the previous recruitment rounds. But from the last recruitment round, this is the data I have, is that 50% of candidates and 61% of candidates in respectively Uganda and Kenya, these teachers were placed in their preferred locations, and that's a list of locations that they have provided. So how can we increase that percentage? The third one is reducing the percentage of teachers' requests to change placement during training. So when the teachers haven't been placed into their preferred locations, and during training they request to change the location, and that number is currently around 30% in Kenya and also 15% in Liberia. So right now this 10% is tentative, but I think we need to later on agree on a number here that is workable and reasonable. And the last one is making sure that our changes to the placement process can still maintain the high percentage of teacher attendance at training for Kenya, which I know Divya is concerned, and rightly so, for East Africa. We want to make sure that we are placing teachers in the right location, but we want to make sure that we have a very high percentage of teachers who do turn up at training, and currently it is a high percentage, so we want to maintain that high percentage. So for daily placement, the immediate objective is to increase the efficiency of the daily placement. So right now, the current goal is to place and finish the daily absence placements before 11 a.m. So right now is before 11 a.m. I think we can set the goal as with the placement tool, we can increase efficiency so that they can be completed before 10 a.m. perhaps. And then as for transfer placements, so transfer placements meaning, for example, Kenya, the end of year 2-window period where we ask teachers where you want to transfer to, and they give us a list of 4 of their preferences, and we try to match them to their preferences. So that's the transfer placement I'm talking about. So for that, increasing the efficiency of that. So Ferris has told me right now it takes 2 people 3 days to complete that placement. And that was, I think, last year around where they had around 1,000 teachers who wanted to transfer. So hopefully with this placement tool, then we can increase the efficiency of that. Secondly is increasing the percentage of successful teacher transfers. So in last year, that percentage is around 30%. So the objective here is to increase that percentage. As for midterm objectives, is to reduce the percentage of teacher transfer requests. So right now, last year there was 1,000 teachers who wanted to transfer, and this year in Kenya, in East Africa, I think is around 700 teachers who want to transfer. And at Australia, it's also because our total number of teachers have reduced. So I think if we are able to place, so obviously I think this teacher transfer is partly because of teachers who have relocated to another location. Maybe they have moved their place, but then another part of it is that they haven't been transferred, they haven't been placed in the right location initially. So if our recruitment placement can be done better, then our objective is to reduce the percentage of teachers who want to make that transfer. And then we can measure that after 1 year and see how many teachers who have been placed through the new placement tool, how many still request for a teacher transfer, and compare that to, in the last 2 rounds, what is the percentage of these 1-year-old teachers who have requested a teacher transfer. And then the long-term objective that we really want to hope to hit is to reduce teacher churn. And this is quite hard to exactly identify what is the teacher churn. So in Kenya, we have done exit surveys, exit interviews with teachers who are leaving, who are resigning, and 14% of them have quoted relocation and location, meaning if relocation meaning when we ask them to relocate to another place, and location meaning they have been placed in a location that they don't like. So these 2 location-related reasons have been quoted as the major reason for the resignation. So how can we reduce that? And then the second objective is to improve lesson completion rate. So if we can place substitutes faster into to cover vacancies, and if we can so for all the placements that can ultimately also improve our lesson completion rate. Okay, so the key insights that I've mostly covered in the user research report. The first one is that the placements, so the 3 kinds of placements that we have, the placement during recruitment, the daily placements, and the teacher transfer placements. So all of them are done on Google Sheets, and it's quite a complicated manual process of requiring some degree of quite complicated Excel skills. And the second thing is that the tracking of the vacancy is also done on Google Sheets, and that is also quite difficult and also a manual process as well. The third insight is that the placing of teachers in East Africa is particularly more difficult to place into their preferred locations. So partly because we have certain parts of East Africa or in Kenya or in Uganda, which are more hardship locations where it's generally quite hard to find teachers from that community. So we have to recruit and place and relocate teachers, and that is quite difficult. And then fourthly, for the different placements in our different countries, now they have come up with their different ways of doing the placement and different ways how we rank teachers and what criteria do we look at when we place these teachers into different locations, or how we place these teachers into different grade levels. So that criteria is different among our different countries. And part of it later on is I want to discuss how we should, if we should, and how we should consolidate these criteria. And next is the substitutes are currently hard to track. So for daily substitutes, we don't track them on our Google Sheet or on Navision where they are covering the classes, because we have a lot of daily absences every day. So we are not tracking them currently. And for permanent substitutes, if it's for a longer permanent vacancy, then we do update that on Navision. But overall, we don't have a way where we can see where the substitutes are. And especially for daily substitutes, we are not tracking them at all. The next one is it's also difficult. I've heard it from Nigeria and other places, difficult to track where teachers are. They should be on Navision, but also Navision is not updated, not most up to date as well. And the last one is a need to get better insights and data for daily placements. So some of the things I've heard about is we want to know which classes have vacancies, which classes don't have teachers. And for example, we want to know how long a particular class has been without teachers, or we want to get more data to advise us on how many substitutes we should be hiring. Do we have enough substitutes to cover these vacancies? So that sort of data and insight is right now is quite difficult to mine to get that data. So yeah, so these are the key insights. If we don't have any more questions at this stage, I'll move on to the placement tool. So this is the placement tool process flow. And so the idea is that the three different kinds of placements that we have, the recruitment placements, this is the teacher transfers, and this one is the daily placements for daily absences and permanent vacancies and long-term vacancies. So for all of these three streams of placements, we can all plug them into the placement tool, and the difference is that the data that we need to input into the tool to make the placements is different for each set of stream, but they actually all need two sets of data. So one set of data is around the vacancies. So for recruitment is the vacancies of the academies and classes that are vacant. For teacher transfer, it's also the vacancies, and daily placement is the absences and vacancies in the classrooms. And then the second set of data is the candidates and the teachers' information. So the recruitment is like the candidates' information, and we can get that from the recruitment tracker, Google Sheet, or our recruitment app. And for the teacher transfers is who are the teachers who want to be transferred and what is that information. And for the daily placements, that's a list of all the substitutes, the daily substitutes, the permanent substitutes, the permanent traveling substitutes, and also the resigned teachers. Because we'll talk about later, resigned teachers are also some teachers that we place as substitutes when we cannot find other substitutes to place in those vacancies. So we also need a list of these teachers and substitutes. We have to know the availability and the information. So all of these two sets of data can be imported into the placement tool, and then they go through an automated matching. So the automated matching will be done based on the criteria and also the logic that we will talk about later. So the logic and the algorithm we will talk about after this. And after the matching is done, then a preliminary placement list would come out, and there is a way for us to make adjustments. So for example, for recruitment placement, the automated match has been done, but then still during trainings, teachers might still want to swap locations, or during training, teachers might still drop out. So we still need to make adjustments. And it's the same for teacher transfers. There's still adjustments that to be made, but after that, we will have a preliminary placement that's done. And after that, on the placement tool, there's a way for you to confirm whether certain other additional HR or other processes have been completed, like whether they still need to complete the training, they still need to sign the contract. And for daily placements, after you go through automated match and we generate this is the daily substitute or the substitute that you should call to cover this class, then the CC agent, the customer care agent, still needs to call the substitute. But in the future, we can think about automating that into an automated phone call, automated text message sent to the substitute, with asking them whether they can go to the school and cover as a substitute. So this also gets plugged into the preliminary placement, and some other processes that will be involved for the daily placement is, for example, for a permanent, when we are placing substitutes to cover a permanent vacancy, then we also look at whether we can convert that substitute into permanent teacher. And if it's a resigned teacher that we're trying to place as a substitute to cover our classes, then here we need to vet the resigned teacher and make sure that they haven't had any disciplinary warning, like corporate punishment and any serious disciplinary warnings issued against them before. So these are other processes we have to check before we finalize the placement. And once the placement is finalized, then this can be synced onto Navision, and Navision will be updated automatically, so that on Navision we will have the information about the availability of where the teachers are, so where the teachers have been placed, where the teachers have been transferred, and where the substitutes are covering the classes. And with that updated information in Navision, we can also and then use that data to come back as our to import into our data over here. For example, where we talked about where the substitutes and the teachers are in availability. Right now it's not on Navision, and right now we need to use Google Sheet, but once we've run this process through, actually that information can be plugged back into our data import point. Okay, so if we don't have any questions here regarding, yeah, yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Yeah, no, that's right. So here for import absences and vacancies, currently it's from Mantis, but I think the point that you talked about is that the teacher attendance database. So we will still be importing like which class is vacant or absent from there. But what we will be updated to Navision is saying which substitute is coming to cover that class. So for each teacher, we have the academy, I think, assigned academy code. So that's what we can update onto Navision, and that's where we can come back and know which substitute, whether they are available, whether they're being assigned to a class or not. Yeah, but you're right, for the absence and vacancy right now, that is still within either the Mantis or the report server. Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, yeah, that's right. And even for absences and vacancies, I think in the future as well, we can also, because I think the goal is we want all of these data to come from one true source of point, which is Navision should be the place that holds all of these data. But right now it doesn't. But in the future, we want to be able to get it from one place. Okay. Okay, so this is a more detailed document of how the algorithm looks like. So if anyone is interested, I've also posted this slide on the calendar invite, so you can go in and have a look. So this is more detailed, and what I'm going to talk about, I won't go into the very details of the logic, but I will talk about enough so that, so I can get your comment on if we agree on this is the approach. But I just want to check. So I think Phil is still not. Oh, Phil. Hi, Phil. You're here. I didn't. Great. I didn't hear the, like, usually there's a sound when someone comes in. No, that's all right. It's not your fault. That's great. So yeah. So yeah. We love. So I'm going to talk about this, and we'll love everyone's comments on whether we think this is a good way to structure the logic of the placement tool. So so I talk about recruitment first before daily placement and teacher transfer. And so our goal is to have a consistent, if we agree on that, our goal is to have a consistent approach to how we place our teachers during recruitment in the different countries. But there will still be some differences because of different circumstances. But right now, how it is structured is that for recruitment, so there's two parts to it. So this part, step 1, step 2, is about how we assign a teacher to the right location and the class. And then another part is how do we score. So I'll just let you see it quickly, but this is how do we score a teacher, and we can go through this later. So this is how do we rank these teachers according to a particular criteria and give them a score. Give them a score which will be helpful for us to place them into the right location and the right class. So in all of our East Africa, Nigeria, or the PPP markets, it would be through the same logic and the same flow. And in the assignment part, there's 2 steps. So the first step, we try to assign them to the right academy and grade level. So grade level meaning whether it's ECD, upper primary, or lower primary. And then the second step is once they are assigned into that grade level, how do you assign them to a class within that grade level? So for all of these countries, in the step 1 part, there is a order of a priority of the candidates. So in East Africa, the teachers who have P1 or grade 3 certification have higher priority than teachers who don't, because we need to register the teachers, and that's a priority for us. And also in Nigeria, it's similar, with teachers who have a Bachelor of Education and NEC over teachers who don't have that. And also for PPP markets, that's also similar. We want to place existing teachers first before we place external recruits. So they all similarly, firstly, have a different bracket of candidates we will consider and assign first, and then we go on to assign like the second tier candidates. And then so within the bracket, then how we do assign them is also according to this logic, which is similar among the different countries. So the first one is to look at their preferences. So for East Africa and actually in all of the countries, we know what their preferences for location is. So in East Africa, we will ask them, we have done this before, and I know that we have stopped, but I proposed to our placement team in East Africa that we should continue and having these preferences, which is a first preferences for academy, and then 3 or 4 preferences for sub-counties that they are willing to work in. So we have their location preferences. And another preferences we have is their preferences for grade level. But that preference for the grade level has to be a grade level that they also qualified for, meaning that they have passed the minimum score of that grade level during the recruitment written assessment tests. So in the first instance, we try to assign them to their preferences, and we do it in a way which is called an equal preference system. And what that means is we're not just looking at their preferences, we're also looking at their ranking according to the criteria that I just showed you, and we will talk about later. And we have a term called slots. So slots just means an academy and a particular grade level. So if Academy A ECD is looking for 3 classes and 3 teachers, that is just the same slot. So why that's the case is because the criteria that we'll talk about later, we are ranking teachers according to what grade level they are in. So for the first step is for each slot, we rank all of the candidates who have chosen that location according to the criteria. And then we look at who is the highest ranking candidate in that slot. And if that candidate is highest ranking for more than one slot, and then that's when we allocate them according to their preferences for location. So for example, if this teacher, he has chosen Academy ABC and he has been find out that he is the best ranking and has a high score for ABC upper primary, then we come to the third step, then we look at his preference, and his preference is actually for Academy B, then we assign Academy B to him. But if he is not the highest ranking for Academy B, he's only highest ranking for Academy A, then we will assign Academy A to him. So for the the first assignment to preferences is we look at the qualifications based on the criteria first, and then we look at preferences when that person is ranking for 2 different slots. So after we do the ranking for, and then also in P1 and grade 3 certification for East Africa, there is also a difference between which level they are. So this is an internal term that we give them, level 0, level 1, level 2, which just means the level of the certification that they get. So level 0, I think, is a certification that's issued by the government and they're registered with the government. Level 1 is they have that teacher qualification, but their certification is just not as good as level 0. So we are always assigning them also according to this order. So firstly, we assign candidates who have level 0 P1 certification according to their preferences, and then we assign candidates with level 1 according to their preferences, and then level 2 according to their preferences. So within this bracket, there is also this priority. So after doing A, then then some of these candidates will go away with their preferences, and hopefully that will be a big part of it. And then the second part is assigning them to remote sub-counties. So this is something that I've discussed to add to East Africa. So right now, during the recruitment, at the last stage of the recruitment, the candidates are asked to fill in a Google form where they indicate what their preferences for the locations are. And I think we can add another question to them to ask them, are you willing to teach in these hardship locations? And we can list out all the 5. I don't know how many hardship locations there are, but we can list them out and we can let them check the boxes if to select it. So after they've been so for all of the teachers who haven't been able to be assigned to their preferences, then we come to the second stage and we look at all of these teachers who have selected remote sub-counties. And if they haven't selected remote sub-counties, then we will assign them to the remote sub-counties. And then the third stage is for the teachers who haven't been allocated to their preferences and have not selected any remote sub-counties, then we will assign the rest of them according to the academy closest to their preferred location. So this is according to distance, and preferred location is meaning when during the Google form they submitted, these are the preferences for the academies and sub-counties that they're willing to work in. So they haven't been allocated there, but we will look at other academies which are close or closest to these locations and assign them according to that. And if there's different people competing for the same academy, then again, we look at the rankings and then we will assign the higher ranking candidate to that academy. So that's for the first bracket of people. And then the second bracket is the candidates without a P1 or grade 3 certification. And ABC is just the same. So it's the same logic. Okay, so this is assigning them. So after this, everyone would be, so after this, people will be assigned to a grade level. there will still be surpluses of teachers who are not assigned, then either they could become permanent substitutes, or I think we can put them on a waiting list for next time. But among the people who have been assigned, and then we assign them to a class. So the assignment of the class is the same among all of the different countries. If there is a subject specialization, we try to assign them to that subject. If that doesn't match, then we assign, in most of the cases, of a higher ranking candidate to a higher grade. So in upper primary, there are all of these classes are subject specializations. So if we have 4 people in upper primary in this academy, then we will look at who has what subject specialization and try to assign them to these classes. If they don't, or if there's unsurplus, then we go back to the default rule, which is a higher ranking candidate will be assigned to a higher grade. So the same for lower primary. And for ECD, there isn't a subject specialization, so it's just higher ranking to higher grade. And then within the stream, so for stream, for example, C3, if C3 has A and B streams, then there's no difference between them. So between them, it would just be a random allocation. And so for Uganda, I wanted to ask Phil, is it the same? Do you know if we also have subject specializations, or is it, or it's not? Yeah. So in C6, okay, right. Oh. Oh, right. Oh, well, because actually in Nigeria, I thought we don't. Ah, I see. Okay, great, great. Yep, so it's going to be similar in Uganda as well. Okay. So what do you think about this? Well, maybe do we want to discuss this first, or do we want to have a look at the criteria as well? Yes. Yes, yes. So we do recall that during the interview. What is their I think during the teacher training college they can specialize in one particular subject. So we ask them that question, like, and if they don't, there's another question about like what is the most comfortable subject that you're teaching in. So it depends on, firstly, if they have a P1 or yeah. So if they don't have a P1 certification, they still considered last after the candidates who have the P1 certification. And then so we are also considering them on the same, like based on their so on their preferred grade level and also on the ranking. So you were saying it's an ECD certified teacher who's ranking very high for upper primary. Yeah. So actually, we do place P1 teachers in ECD because I think the priority now is to place all P1 teachers first, even if they are placed in ECD. And I think that's what I heard from Robert and Josephine is later on we can switch out the non P1 teachers and we can switch these teachers if we want to the primary. So we will still place them into ECD in the ECD class. Mm. Yeah, yeah. So there's always a way to do manual adjustments after the placement is done. Like if you have if I guess like there's still some changes that you need to make. So there's always a way that you can change it, change some placements, and and right now actually because we do consider their qualification first. So if a teacher they are best ranking in upper primary and lower primary, then that person, then we will look at, oh, their preferred is in upper primary, so we'll give them to upper primary. But if actually that teacher is not ranking well in lower primary and ranking better in upper primary, then that means that person won't be qualified for the lower primary class. So it wouldn't come to preferences. So here we always consider what their ranking is first, and only if they're ranking similarly for two different slots, and then we look at their preferences.
So, but the ranking system, the way it works, is literally on there's a baseline threshold that qualifies you on our selection tools for ECD, and then if you score a little bit higher than that baseline, it qualifies you for the lower primary, and then higher than that for upper primary. So it's not as though it's saying your score. Oh, I see what you're saying. So this is actually a changed system.
Yes, so it's not just the interview scores. It's based on it, but yeah, we can actually go in and talk about this now. So actually there is a difference. So if it's ECD, then we are like this is East Africa's proposal. Like we are considering all these factors, and if primary, we're considering these factors. So there's actually different criteria based on which grade level you are in. Yeah. So yeah, maybe let's talk about the criteria. In East Africa, Nigeria, and the PPP market, and also AP. So in all three of them, we consider the assessment and interview scores, but there are differences. So I think in Nigeria, when I talked to Stacy and Twiggy, Stacy had the most detailed thinking about which part of the score does she think can predict a better teacher in nursery. So for her, she says like storytelling is the most important for a teacher who is in nursery. And for upper primary, it's a pupil work sample that is that is given like the higher weighting because that's more important. And in lower primary, it's the same but without the pupil work sample. Whereas in East Africa, they're just taking an average of all of this, and it's a weighted score of also if you have an ECD certificate, then you have then you are highly prioritized because without an ECD certificate you won't get 0% of this weighted score. And then it's this and also the O level grade. So they also consider O level grades, and in primary it's O level grades, and so the O level grades is not considered anywhere else, and the ECD certificate doesn't exist anywhere else. So in Nigeria and PPP, it's only these two things. Another thing is in Nigeria, for the nursery, there's a prerequisite that they only consider female, only female teachers. So if you are a male teacher, even if you will probably score really high in storytelling and you would be ranking very high on nursery, then you will not be considered to be able to be allocated to a nursery class. But then, so I've asked them why, and then they say that it's a cultural thing, and actually, I'm not sure if there has never been any male teachers who've preferred nursery, but I think generally that is the case. Yeah, so I think for this, can we talk about do we want to make them more consistent, and what other weighted score is, but and also maybe Phil and Divya, we also can think about, is this something that we're going to take offline later and talk about what the weighted scores are. But yeah, just get your initial views on this first.
So I guess on its face, it sounds right. I guess I would just have to dig deeper.
Yeah.
There's a few questions from me, not necessarily for answers now, but as I say, it may be that you and Divya have a conversation offline. But Divya, things like a bias towards a particular gender, I don't know whether that is politically correct for us to do or not. It's not for me to comment, it's for you to comment. I know in this country we'd have problems doing that kind of thing. Obviously, we're not teaching in this country. And then secondly, whatever we can do to try and make this a kind of global view across the different territories in terms of how we create these scores, the better. In the sense that if we had 80 or 90% of this stuff was common, and we only varied the 10% on the basis of individual countries, that would obviously be better.
I totally agree that I would much rather it was globally consistent with minor variations rather than everyone got something different. And Steve, from my personal experience in Liberia, when we tried placing men into ECD, there was a ton of pushback.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can speak for Nigeria that the parents would not be comfortable. It's basically a cultural thing. Parents would not be comfortable having meals with the ECD.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay, great. So then Divya and Phil, you can take this offline and just let us know what do you think should be the final, the ratios for the criteria. Yeah, so basically that criteria, so coming back to this, so that's why for each slot, for each grade level, they will have a different ranking, and we will choose based on what is their most highest ranking, what are they most suitable for, which grade level they are suitable for, and then based on that assign them to a class. Okay, so is this slide okay? Okay, then I'll move on to Nigeria. So Nigeria is very similar, as I already mentioned before. There's 3 different priorities of candidates, and then they're also assigning according to preferences and how close the academy is to their home region. So that's only if they couldn't be assigned to the preferences, then it's according to the distance to their home region. The difference here is okay. So this is Phil, you're saying for the upper primary there will be subject specializations, right? So it's just lower primary and nursery we don't have it. Okay, then the difference here in nursery is that Stacey observes that it's better if we assign a higher ranking candidate to a lower grade, because the lower grades actually need more skills for the teacher to become a better teacher. So this is different. Whereas for the other countries, we are allocating to a higher grade. So we can also think about, do we want to consolidate that? Should we be doing this for the other countries, or is it okay that we leave Nigeria to be different here? Okay, so I think at the end I will also list these as questions that we want to finalize by, for example, next week. And then so this is in PPP. So the priority of candidates we look at is existing teachers who are on payroll, existing teachers who are not on payroll, assign them first, and then for external candidates who are not willing to relocate, and external candidates who are willing to relocate. Okay, I think I just got an email from Marie saying that her mic doesn't work. Okay, so I'm just looking at email. My mic isn't working for the full call. For slide 11 on placements, I actually think this needs to be very territory specific. So slide 11, including that Uganda and Kenya academies, they need to be separate. In Uganda, there's very different salary scales depending on what grade levels you are in. Primary 7 makes more than primary 1. So all teachers would prefer primary 7, and I think we need to have a system for how we decide which teachers get that if we have two equal candidates. Okay, so Marie's saying is in Uganda, primary 7 makes more than primary 1. So more teachers would prefer primary 7. Right. So we have if we have two equal candidates, like you suggest, we do look at their preferences and we ask for their preferences. So if they tell us their preference is that they want to teach an upper primary class, so if one person's preference is upper primary class, one person's preference is lower primary class, then we will be assigning them according to their preferences. Let me think about this question more, but I wonder if the fact that we consider their qualification, but we also consider their preferences can answer that question. So, Marie, you're still on, right? It's just that your mic doesn't work. Shall we come back to this later? Or does anyone else have any thoughts on that? About the upper in Uganda we have different salaries. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think, sorry. So I think what we're doing is we're ranking them first to the qualification before looking at their preferences. Is we're saying that we want to allocate you to, well, according to our criteria, what we think you will be most suitable for. And if you are suitable for more than two, then it's okay. We will follow your preferences. So yeah. Mm. Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so for PPP, so existing teacher first and then external candidates. And then it's also a similar assignment to classes based on the subjects first and then higher ranking teacher to a higher grade. And I know like for Andhra Pradesh, they are just generally higher ranking teacher to higher grade. Okay, so that was recruitment placement. And then moving on to daily absence placement. So for daily absences, it's mainly according to the location. And in East Africa, there's a priority for us to assign permanent substitutes first, and then daily substitutes, and then permanent traveling substitutes. And they're all within sub-county. So So I've been told that if they are already outside the sub-county, then they would not be willing and they would not have enough time to cover a class for a daily absence. So the restriction that we have here is within sub-county. And for Nigeria, it's also the closest permanent substitute within the same region. On long-term absence placement, in Nigeria, so it's much simpler because right now they only have a permanent substitute, and although in future they would introduce a daily substitute. And East Africa, for long-term absence, we will use all 4 different kinds of substitutes, which is a permanent traveling, daily, and the resigned teachers. And this, so the first, we will assign teachers who are already in that base academy. And the second is we will assign the closest substitute in the county. So someone who is still close by inside the county of the academy that has a vacancy. And then the priority for that is to assign permanent traveling substitutes first, permanent substitute next, and then daily substitutes. And assigning people who are in the sub-county first before assigning people in the county. And then, so after this, then 3 and 4 is basically when we need to relocate a substitute outside the county to travel to a further away location. Then our priority is to assign someone to a remote location first, because remote locations would be more difficult generally for us to assign. And we'll look to the permanent traveling substitutes or the permanent substitutes to assign to that remote location. And if you can't assign anyone, then we'll look at who's a resigned teacher or a daily substitute in that county who can be assigned. And then the 4th one is to allocate teachers for a non-remote location. And then that's also looking at any permanent traveling substitute or permanent substitute and a resigned teacher or daily substitute in a county. Sorry. So, okay. The next is for a permanent vacancy placement. So when a teacher has terminated or has been resigned or has absconded, and when the vacancy comes up. So the difference between this one and the long-term vacancy is that we will also consider, so currently in East Africa, I don't think we consider their qualifications so much. Only when, I don't think we have the luxury so much to do that yet. It's more based on the location. I know we do that in Nigeria, so I think we're introducing this into the new placement tool. And this criteria is also based on talking to our team in East Africa and Nigeria and what the criteria is based on. And this criteria is different from the recruitment criteria because at that time we only have the assessment scores and the interviews to go by, and this is when they're already a substitute. So the first step for both of them is to place any substitute in their base academy, and if they are qualified to be converted to a permanent teacher, then we'll ask them to be converted to a permanent teacher. And then so that's the first step. The second logic that we look at is if we can't place anyone in the base academy, then in East Africa, we try to place substitutes who can be converted into a permanent teacher, which is substitutes who have a P1 or grade 3 certification. And then we also look at the distances, how far they are away from the vacant class, but we also look at their qualifications. So we will first look at all of the permanent substitutes who are in the same sub-county, and then in a similar way, we look at what we rank them according to the criteria of how they would rank if they were placed in that ECT class, in that vacant class, or if they're ranked in a primary class. And then we will allocate the highest ranking teacher to that class, and also call them to ask them whether they're willing to convert to permanent teacher. So we do the same, and then for a bigger geographical region, and for that. So in Nigeria as well, this is also similar. After the base academy, we will be placing the permanent substitute according to the criteria in outside the base academy. And so these are the two differences in the criteria. So for East Africa, ECD, we're still looking at ECD certificates and O-level grades. The difference is that instead of the assessment scores, we're looking at training scores. So the same subjects are considered, but we're considering what their scores are at the end of the training. So, and then that's the same for primary as well. So primary, we're looking at the certification, and then the O-level grades, and then the training scores. So in Nigeria, so there's also the same female gender prerequisite with nursery, but then the other two considerations are, it's the same for nursery and primary, and that's the average of the current and previous term coaching score. And this is a coaching, so every term they have a coaching score that's given by the trainer, the training team that comes to the academy, and this is to them the most important indication of how well that substitute is doing. So they will rank them according to this criteria, and then assign them to the relevant class, but also asking them whether they're willing to convert or not. And then so after we assign this, the third is any other substitute. So if a permanent with P1 certification can't be assigned, then we look at other P1 other permanent substitutes without the certification, other daily substitutes, and other resigned teachers who can be assigned. And in Nigeria, it's the same permanent substitutes, but assigning them outside the local government area, which I know from Tugi is quite difficult, because it's difficult to ask a permanent substitute to go outside their local area and fulfill a vacancy there. So also the criteria here, I think Divya and Phil, you can also discuss offline if these criteria are okay. Do we have any questions about this part? Okay, so if we don't, then I'll move on to the teacher transfer placement. So in East Africa right now, that's done the end of the year. In Nigeria, that is done at the end of every term. And in East Africa, of course, it's a much bigger volume. I know that in Nigeria, I think Tuki said that in last term, there were 4 teachers who asked to be transferred. So there's still quite a small volume now, but I guess that would keep on continuing rising up after we have more teachers. And actually for PPP, this is all not relevant. Actually, I forgot to mention for the placements, the daily placements in PPP and also in India right now, if there is any vacancies that it's been fulfilled by the vice principal and then the head, I can't remember what the term is, but basically the principal, the headmaster, and also the vice principal. So they don't have any substitutes. So that's not relevant there. And also for teacher transfers, they also have very minimal teacher transfers. So it's more, right now is more of an East Africa question, but Nigeria also has it at a smaller volume. So this is also similar in logic to the way that we assign our candidates to their preferences, considering various criteria. So in East Africa, they will give us 4 academy preferences. In Nigeria, I think we can start asking them for 2 preferences, but only if they are willing to go to those 2 preferences. I know currently most of them are just giving 1 preference, but we can ask them for 2. And then we assign according to these criteria. So the 60% of qualification is whether they have a T1 certification, whether they have an ECD certification, if the class that they are going to be assigned to is an ECD class, and then the length of service with bridge, the discipline, whether they have a disciplinary warning, which will be a deducting mark from the overall score, the teacher bonuses, which is an indication of how well they've been doing, and then the gift code redemption, which I'm told is indicates how well they're performing with their outreaches and parent engagement. So right now, this is the proposal that that the East African team have to the current year-end placement that they're doing. And so in Nigeria, they have the same average of current and previous term coaching score, which was the criteria that we looked at in the previous long-term placement. So 40% goes to that, and 15% towards the length of service with bridge, 30% towards disciplinary warning, and 15% is the termly appraisal with the academy manager. So at the end of every term, there's also an appraisal score that the academy manager gives them. So we can see some similarities here. There are the length of service and also the disciplinary warnings that are the same, and then there's other criteria that we look at. So again, this I will send it to you, to Divya and Phil, and you can also think about and agree what the percentage and what are the criteria that we should be looking at. So after the first step, they are assigned to a academy and the grade level. And then within that grade level, if there are different classes that can be assigned to, then we will assign them according to the same class rule that we mentioned before, which is around the specialization and then and otherwise assigning them to a higher ranking class. Okay, do we have any questions here? If not, then okay, so that was all for the placement tools algorithm. And so this is our proposal for how we should face this project. Because there's a placement tool applies for the 3 different placements streams that we have. So the proposal is for the first phase to do the placement for the recruitment placements first. And so all of this would set up the groundwork for the phase 2 and phase 3, which we've put as phase 2 being the daily placement and phase 3 being the teacher transfer. So a lot of the things that we would do in the phase 1 would be useful for the other phases, because they would share the same placement interface, and some of the algorithm would also be similar, and also the way that we do data input is also similar as well. Another part is like linking to Navision, the auto update to Navision, and this one is how. So for East Africa right now, using the Google form and the USS and trying to use the USSD platform going forward to collect candidate information about their preferences for the location. That's something that we can also work on improving as well. So that's phase 1. The phase 2 is on the daily placement tool. So there's the algorithm part. Another part is the scheduled placements, meaning that, so there's placements that come in and have to be done today, but then there's also placements that needs to be scheduled. For example, the maternity leaves. With the ticket might come in today, but the maternity leave will actually happen 3 months, I'm not sure, like 2 months, 3 months, or 2 weeks later. So the scheduling of that as a pending placement that's to be done. So that's another part of it. This is, once the placement is done, right now the customer care agent needs to use that information to call the substitutes to confirm whether they can cover the vacancy. So a way that we can automate this process, either by an automated call to the substitutes and getting them to answer by clicking on 1, 2, 3 whether they're willing to come to take that class, or an automated text message sent to the substitute. So this automation part is something we can also think about. And another part is the report. So this report is not necessarily linked to the daily placement, but it's a report that, like in the key insights, we talked about what are the different data and insights that we want to get out from placements. And so I think discuss like what sort of reports do we need, and if we want to find out about like which classes don't have teachers, how long they haven't had teachers. So different data and different insights that we might need through reports. And then the phase 3 is the placement tool for teacher transfer. And this could actually be a phase 4 because it's not really linked to placement tool for teacher transfer, but the improvements that we talked about, the improvements that we need to make on Navision to streamline the process so that in the future we are not getting all of these data from just spreadsheets and Google Sheets, but we can pull in these data from Navision, like where are the classes which have vacancies, all of the information about our teachers and the substitutes, and also the resigned teachers information. If we can get if from Navision we can pull in the resigned teachers who have indicated to us that they are willing to come back and work in at Bridge. And so if we have like that checkbox and that's available for our people's team to indicate that this resigned teacher is someone who wants to come back and work at Bridge, then we have a smaller subset of resigned teachers that we know that we should go out and look for doing daily placements instead of really a really long list of teachers that we have now, and we have to keep on calling them and getting rejected, and that process takes longer. Okay, so can we talk about do we agree on this priority of the phasing, that we're doing recruitment placement first before daily placement and before teacher transfer? Divya, Marie, Phil, thoughts on this?
So I'm not totally agnostic on it. I do think, however, that the phase three stuff to me is like the more important for teacher retention. But like the ordering of it, as long as it's happening in short order as a whole, like I'm not less concerned about it.
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't think, to be perfectly honest, I don't think we know the answer to that question just at the moment. I mean, we've had the luxury of Stacey having slightly more time than we normally would have to go through the detail of what she's going through at the moment. So we've got a good amount of detail that we can then have conversations with our technical colleagues around, but we don't really know the answer to that at the moment.
So I mean, I think what Divya and I both say though is that your phase one stuff is the one that we're both like least concerned about right now. Not that it's not a problem, but that it's something that I think like is happening with a lot of probably more manpower than necessary right now, but it's happening. You know what I mean? Whereas the other two, I think, are ones where we're seeing greater challenges with.
Right. Well, I think if that's the case, we can do the daily. I think we can switch out and do the daily placement as the phase one first. Steve, I don't think that's a big problem.
I think that's fine.
Yeah,
if
yeah,
there's a collective agreement
yeah.
we should alter the phasing, then that's fine. Now is the time to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I'll support that because the daily placement is something that's an ongoing challenge, whereas the teacher transfer is like end of a term before you start a new one.
Actually, Marie, just in case you can hear us, can you just on the presentation, can you just type into I'll just see whether it'll let me do it now. Oh, she's going.
It's here, we can hear.
Thumbs up and thumbs down. Marie, Phil, are you saying go in Stacey's version, do phase two, then three, then one?
I would say, yeah, I'm totally fine. 2-3-1 or 2-1-3, as long as three by the end of the next term, say first term in Kenya, is like ready to go.
Pause the caveat just for a second. Divya, did I say it right from your perspective? 2-3-1 as well. Yeah, she's thumbs up from Marie for 2-3-1. Okay. So now, sorry, now Phil, go back to your caveat about the term start.
And so 2-1-3 would allow, because one will happen again, probably with more frequency three to me is the long-term solution to prevent like this like massive like flow of people through training. Because if you allow people to transfer and be happier with their placements, we're going to actually end up churning less and having less trainings as a whole, right? So um, as long as three is complete by the end of the term, so people can like put transfer requests in by the end of the term, like the order of it, like if it's 1-3 or 3-1, all those kinds of things.
Sorry, give me the month when you say the term. Which one are you referring to?
So, well, I guess now we have to have actually ask the country what they're comfortable with, right? Like, do we want teachers changing at the end of the term or just at the end of the year? And I guess Maria's gonna say year. Yeah. So like basically, it's already too late for three. Basically, at this point,
Mm.
it's gonna be done in the next month. So at that point, like three, as long as it's done by next fall.
Oh, so you're talking by say August 2018.
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at the count at the term years, right? It looks like Marie's typing something. She typing? Are you typing something, Marie? Marie's got like viewpoints and
Okay,
I'd be interested to hear her perspective.
Hmm?
so I guess one of the things we don't know at this stage is if we do this in three phases as you're suggesting, we can't guarantee at this stage because we don't know what's going to happen. None of us know what's going to happen over the next 6 months, for example, where a bunch of other priorities might suddenly come in, which means, for example, that we can't get the final phase in during a time we previously now hoped we might do. So we should just be a little bit cautionary, just in terms of if we think there is a phase three, we definitely have to have by a certain date. And if we only manage to do the first two of these phases and then something else came along, is that a concern or not?
And my only concern is that it will continually be pushed off. It'll continually be a long-term, causing long-term pain, but it's a priority that never reaches the point where it's the best.
Well, I actually think if we have done the phase one and phase two, most of the algorithm for the teacher transfer is in it's I don't know how much percentage, but it's largely done. So when we come to do phase three, that would be a much quicker process. So yeah, so taking that into account as well.
So everybody's okay for two, then one, then three?
Well,
Can't quite hear it, Marie.
you have
Can you read my email? Yes. I'll read your yes. So Marie's email said number three is not, or we've written this here, is most only helpful for Kenya and for the next 2 months. So like to agree with that timing.
Number three is not a big issue for Nigeria, but I don't selfish because obviously it's a big issue. So
Sorry.
there's one more email from Marie.
Sorry, Marie's just sent a subsequent one. She's saying that actually maybe not from a previous one. She's saying for PPPs we do a lot of transferring. So you're saying therefore, Marie, that sounds like that's are you saying 2-3-1? Okay. So Marie's tentatively going for two, then three, then one. Phil, Divya?
Yeah, I'm okay. So, Marie, when we do transferring, is it truly an issue of transferring or is it an issue of placing RTTIs? Like, so it's, we don't, if a teacher's been there already, like if this in a partnership school, they're not like, oh, I want to go to a different partnership school. They literally are just like, like the RTTIs, the ones that just graduated, right, are the ones who got to place. So that's actually a one problem more than it is a three. What do you think?
You're going to have to ask a yes or a no.
Yep, she agreed.
So you're
Three
saying
is going to be, I think three is something we have to tackle, and we just can't let it fall off the like our radars. But from like how much is happening like right now and how we're going to solve like our challenges, like our bigger challenges. Two is the one that's like a daily challenge. Three is the one that's like a quarterly challenge. I'm sorry, one is the one that's like a every month to quarterly challenge. Three is an annual challenge that is causing long-term ramifications that create more of a one problem, but that we have to solve one problem at once.
so we're all agreeing to the
Mm. Yes.
Yeah.
two,
I
one,
just
three.
don't want to see three fall away. Like I don't want to
obviously it seems to be it is a big issue in East Africa. So yeah.
I think Africa is national conclusion.
All right.
As opposed to
Okay. So it sounds like we should.
Yeah, we should definitely start with two anyway.
I'm glad we're all agreeing on the
Mm-hmm.
one anyway.
Yeah.
But I think no one's violently disagreeing on the second and third. So I think we should just on the basis of this call just go two, then one, then three, unless anybody over the next few days has any subsequent information that they want to add to that.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, okay, so like Steve said, we agree on two, one, and then three. And so the next steps is so I'll send Divya, I send to Divya, Phil, the criteria so far, and then so when do you think you can get back to us on finalizing the criteria? Maybe early next week. Is that okay?
yeah, I think so. We would just have to set up time to. For one, I have to set up a work block to review it, and then have you and me to.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. What was that? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We can discuss it. Marie. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So same time next week we can discuss just on the criteria part. Okay. Okay, great. And then and at the same time our tech team is already reviewing the feasibility of the algorithm. So by next week, on next Wednesday as well, I can update you. I think their preliminary review is it's fine. It's something that we can build. But we will also have a conversation with Kent next week. So by next Wednesday, we can confirm whether it's something that's doable. But it should be okay. And after that, we'll start looking at what user stories and what features we will need for the placement tool. And then I will get started on the UI design sketches for the placement tool. And after that, we will have a fortnightly stakeholder showcase. So starting from next week would just be talking about the algorithm, but after that, like every 2 weeks, hopefully we'll have something to share going forward. Okay, great. That's all I have. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for all your work.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
Marie will learn sign language next time.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.